I first want to welcome you guys, Lily and Benjamin. Thank you so much for joining us. I just can't say enough how excited I am for this interview. Introduce yourselves for our audience who might not know who you are.
I'm Ben Bromfield. I'm a composer, most recently for Ginny Georgia with Lili Haydn here. I also do the score for an animated kids show called Boss Baby Back in Business. And I'm a jazz pianist originally, and now a multi-instrumentalist, and a composer of many different styles and genres of music, melding them together.
Hey, thanks for having us. So I'm Lili Haydn and a composer. I work with Ben on Ginny and Georgia, and I also have a bunch of movies and stuff out on available to stream, including a wonderful documentary called Strip Down, Rise Up, which is also on Netflix. And it's really empowering for women especially. And I make records and have for a long time, a lot of albums. My latest solo album came out 2 months ago, and it's called More Love, because I believe that there's no problem in the world for which more love and understanding is not the answer. And I have a band called Opium Moon, and we won a Grammy 2 years ago and are coming out with a new album in August.
Wow, that's amazing. First of all, congratulations on your album. That's incredible. I need to know, how did you guys get into music?
The story I've been told is that I asked to take piano lessons when I was 5, and I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, suburb of Boston, in the early 90s mostly. Jazz education was just sort of starting to become more mainstream, as opposed to most people, when they get into music, I think start with classical music. That's more common. A neighbor of my parents happened to be this guy named Harvey Finstein, who taught jazz piano. He invited me over to have piano lessons at age 6, and I started studying with him. Jazz piano was like my thing my entire childhood. I consider it really lucky for 2 reasons. I found an instrument and a genre that I really liked from a super young age, and for my entire life have been doing that. It's very common, I've noticed, for a lot of people to start with a different instrument than they landed on as like their main instrument. And so I've always considered myself really lucky that I just sort of like found something I took to from a really young age and just sort of continued on with it.
So I had a dream I could play violin when I was 7. Actually, and I told my mom, and she honored that dream. And she picked me up from school one day, and I was crying because they wouldn't let me in the orchestra because they didn't have a violin small enough for me, because I was a couple of years younger than the other kids in my grade. And from the second that I got my violin, my mom wrote a song in a key that I could just play open strings with. So I didn't have to know how to play before I started jamming. I just recommend anybody who wants to get a kid to start playing, let them jam, like have a sense of playing right away if possible. And then I played with my mom. She was a singer-songwriter, and then started jamming with bands in college, and then ended up on stage collaborating with a lot of amazing artists like Herbie Hancock and Sting and Jimmy Page from Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin, and Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. And
Every time you do the list, I hear new people I didn't know about.
And Tom Petty. And then I started playing and singing for Hans Zimmer on his movie scores, and people started asking me to score films for them because they liked my records. So I kind of got into it that way, and I like to do both. I'm not ready to stop, and we're getting ready to start making more music for Ginny and Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. The whole world is ready for season 2. I guess you kind of answered this, Lily, but for both of you, how did you actually get into TV and movie composition in particular? How did that come about?
My story is that I kind of figured out in my late teens that this was a career path. I was actually studying at the University of Pittsburgh. I was double majoring in music, but I wasn't really going at the music career. At age 20, I transferred to Berklee College of Music that has a film scoring program. The path is this. This is one path to get this career, and more or less it's the path that I was on. Go to a film scoring program at a music college, get internships and assistantships. If you're lucky, you can sort of end up with an assistantship with one composer who really kind of takes a liking to you and mentors you, and sort of stick with that person for a while, get to really understand how they work on this, how they do this kind of work, get to collaborate a little bit with them. And then you have to be lucky again when you leave that job to find a way to get your name out there. In this industry, nobody wants to hire anybody that hasn't already done the type of work, which is a really annoying catch-22 for folks who haven't. It's almost like that getting that in is really hard. For me, Tree Adams, he's a composer, fantastic TV film composer, also the person who introduced Lili and I, but he was the person who he was like my 6th or 7th composer I had assisted. It was mostly all short-term stuff. And he trained me, and I worked for him for 5 years. I would work for Tree for probably 8 or 9 months every year. And every time he would sort of cut me loose because the shows ended, he was like, okay, I don't really have anything for you. So like, I'll see you in a couple months and we're back. Each year I would push the ball a little bit forward with my own career, with my own contacts, because I'd be, bored and need to make money. But it did help to have worked with him, because when networking with people, it was like, hey, I've worked on this season of this show, and I've worked on this stuff, and this is what I've done, and here's some of my music. And people would take more interest in that because, it's sort of more credibility. I'd say the last year before I left his company, I ended up doing a bunch of collaborations with composers who worked on animated television series, pretty hands-off, where they were just like, I've got this scene, can you score it? And that's kind of like the highest level in this industry of assistantship that you can attain, where you're just hired to write music, just to do the job for someone who's too busy. One of those guys introduced me to his manager because he is incredibly kind. A lot of people aren't interested in doing that for folks that help them. When I met the manager, he was like, oh, you've worked on all these shows, just like what I was saying about how people take more interest as you work on more stuff. When a studio I hear is looking for a composer, I'll send you the information as well. So then I came up with the idea of bringing in another friend of mine who was is a successful composer into that manager's fold, because he didn't have a manager. And I said, why don't we pitch for stuff together through the manager? And like 6 months later, we landed Boss Baby, which I've been working on for 4 years. Bottom line is, it was a combination of networking, sort of paying dues and doing all this assistant stuff, and luck.
I hadn't done any television, really. I'd done a little bit of additional composition, but nothing that anybody could. I had just done a bunch of movies, but I hadn't done. But TV is a different schedule, different pace, and studios really want to know that you can handle it, that you can deliver. And I didn't have a track record in television, so I would not have been invited to even pitch on Ginny and Georgia if it hadn't been for Ben inviting me. It
is a little bit its own animal, TV composing, because of the pace of it and just needing to deliver things, and because you're sort of ingratiating yourself into a machine that is the show, which is moving at a fast pace and involving all these different departments, none of which are musical. You're the only musical one, and you have to be able to deliver at their level, at their deadlines, deal with their notes. There's a certain mentality that goes with just working on a TV show that's separate from music, and that all the other people that are working on the show, editors, they all have that mentality too.
A lot of that is also true for films, but usually it's a more intimate relationship between you and the director. Studio and the rest of the departments are less involved in that core relationship, if you're lucky. So that's been my world, is basically becoming best friends with the directors.
So my next question is kind of about, how did the opportunity for Ginny and Georgia actually come about? How did you hear about it? What happened? Tell us that story.
Okay, so I'll start with this one, because Sarah Lampert, the show's creator, is a friend of mine from high school, the high school that Wellsbury High is based on. I have an intimate relationship with the show, a deep connection to it, because I was essentially in Sarah's, we were like in the friend group together in high school. that is not directly portrayed in the show, but largely influences the show. And Sarah and me both, we have a lot of great memories from high school. Our high school was nuts. Like it was like Wellsbury High. It was like there was a ton of stuff to do. It was super. Newton, Massachusetts, like Wellsbury, is a super sort of privileged place to grow up, but it also like has a lot of weird blind spots. The whole show it's really interesting to watch the way the town is portrayed, because it's inspired by our town and a couple other towns in Massachusetts. Sarah was very excited to tell me about it when she showed the show, when she sold the show to Netflix. This was in, I think, 2018. And I was like, that's amazing. She sent me the script and I was like, this is really good. And I mean, the thing about my relationship with Sarah is that like, we weren't really like, we didn't talk about work that much. Most of our friendship is sort of centered around the fact we go way back, all of our mutual friends and hanging out together. I don't know if I had ever read one of her scripts, and I was completely blown away. She approached me. I had known Lili through Tree, my old boss. And I had always wanted to, since I read the script, felt like using a female voice in the score would be really effective. I had sort of put out the word for a composer who is a woman who uses her voice as a scoring instrument. And Tree reminded me of Lili. And so I called Lili, who was on her way to India to play a gig with her band. And I said, I've got this amazing opportunity and I'd love to do it with you. And like, I need you to upload everything, all the music you possibly can before you get on the plane, so I can put together a reel of some of your stuff and some of my stuff. And they liked the music that we put together from the two of us. Yeah, I mean, from that, we got hired shortly after that.
That is really cool. What inspired most of the work that you had done for the album?
So what we do when we score films and I guess TV also now that we're doing it, is you basically you get inside the head of the creator of the, you try to figure out what it needs to be. And then you write what they call kind of a suite, which is basically like a 5-minute kind of a thing that sort of encompasses like a couple of characters and some changes and the development of a theme. So we created a bunch of these bigger pieces that we could draw on to be able to score little, smaller moments and change it as needed. So a lot of these pieces were either written directly to picture or were the pieces of music that we did to sort of get inside the heads of the creators of the show, and then we drew on those pieces for the rest of the scenes.
For example, like Georgia's theme is one where it was written mostly away from picture. And then when a scene came up where it would fit, which is that scene in the first episode where Georgia's like goes to pick Ginny up from school and the kids are like, who's that? Like, she's super hot. So the original title of that was actually Who's That? Because we tend to name stuff after like lines and whatever. It shows up several times, sometimes just the melody, and then the context will be completely different. Like there's like kind of a spooky, like eerie version of it in the end credits of episode 10. And you can actually hear if you listen to, and it's also the last track of the soundtrack. You can listen, the first track of the soundtrack and the last track actually have the same melody.
And it's more like the first time you hear it, it's sort of fun and quirky. And then by the end, it's like, ooh, this is a little bit darker than I thought it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the soundtrack is sometimes stuff like Georgia's theme, and other times it's just music that we like, good sort of longer pieces that are really fleshed out from the score, like the scene where Ginny is like sexting with Hunter in episode 4. We had like, that's a really long piece of music that was like really involved, and we did a lot of versions of it because that's like an almost silent scene. So the music really had to tell the story.
One of the pieces from Casino Night.
Yeah.
Remember, and that was sort of like an Ocean's 11.
Yeah, like there's like one jazzy piece on there, yeah.
And I have to say, one thing that I loved about the composition in Ginny and Georgia is that your music particularly came in when there was like a milestone moment, and I loved it. Like it always came in to mark these moments in the character's development or in the story that it really added. It just works so well. I think it's so nice to see when music complements scenes and it's not just there to please people, but it actually complements it. What would you say were some of your most like not even favorite, but most memorable moments when working on Ginny and Georgia?
It was such a whirlwind. Like whenever I start a project, honestly, it's like the Hunger Games for me. It's like they're dropping you in a new world and you have to figure out how to survive.
Yeah, I think that's a funny analogy, and it just comes from the fact because of that when music happens in a show, it's one of the last things that happens, and you have to basically bring the ball across, or bring the ball into the end zone, or carry the thing across the finish line, with those people, with the director and producer. So it can be a little disorienting a lot of the time, especially with a project has this unique of a tone. The most memorable experience is finishing it and how we all felt like so happy and so exhausted, and like, it was just such a labor of love, but it was just like a labor of love. And like we were just like, oh, thank God. We did it. The feeling of just like, satisfaction, but also relief is over and done, and everyone is happy and everyone's excited. And then to see it come out and just be a huge hit.
Yeah. How did that feel when you finally saw it on Netflix? How did it feel?
I mean, we've both had other things on Netflix, and so that's always fun. But then to see it at #1 for so long, wow, it's still at #1. And we found out actually that it actually beat all of Netflix's records for the most time at #1 worldwide of any show that they've ever done.
It was really great to watch it. I did sit down, I watched all 10 episodes, and it was really interesting because a lot of time when we're doing this work, we kind of skip over the scenes that don't have score, which is a lot of this show. In some episodes where there were like either songs that were pre-existing or just silent scenes. Or you're working on this one scene, then you're working on an earlier scene, you're kind of working on it out of order. So to just sit down and experience the episodes as they are intended and watch how they all flow was really cool. And there are some really great scenes that I don't remember watching at all. I mean, I must have seen them once because I always watch down the episode when I get it, just in full. But that might be the last time I saw those scenes. Some really funny scenes.
One of my favorite scenes in the whole series is when Abby, it's after her parents get divorced, and she's really upset with the friend group, with Mang, and Ginny says, "You're a bitch," and she slaps her, and then they all slap each other themselves. That was brilliant.
I guess I wonder a little bit what actually attracted you to working on, I guess you could say, like a teen type of show. Obviously, Ben, you have the personal connection to the high school and to the creator, but if you have more to say in that, and Lily as well, what actually made you want to work on a teenage show?
I don't really think about it as a teenage show. I mean, it is sort of, obviously, geared, it's got a young adult sensibility, but it's also very deep and dealing with universal issues like acceptance and where do you belong, and identity, and body image issues, and the way people deal with chaos in their lives. Ginny, deals with self-harm. There's a lot of really heavy issues, and these are and especially for women as well. So to me, it's never about like, well, what genre is this? It's like, am I feeling the emotion? Can I bring more heart to this, and make you feel and have more compassion, and can I stir up emotions?
For me, a lot of it was wanting to do something a little bit different. I had made a little bit of a name for myself doing these animated shows, and I have a deep love for that. I mean, my shows are, even though a lot of the audience is kids, particularly Boss Baby, I also did a show. It was a Where's Waldo cartoon with DreamWorks, although I believe in England it's Where's Wally. Both of those shows, although the audience was kids, the people making them are very funny and clever. And a lot of my job is sort of centered around making them laugh. And I have a deep, deep love for doing that. I used to be a music director for improv troupes. I used to improvise piano as underscore for improv troupes, which is kind of a similar thing. You know, you're helping, they're making jokes and you're basically making it funnier with music. And for me, as like an amateur funny person, I have a deep love for doing that. Really, like the level of gravitas that you can bring to a drama. And Ginny Georgia is also very funny, despite being technically a drama. It's a dramedy. There is a lot of opportunity for like really enhancing emotion, bringing out emotion, making things just really, something that's just really beautiful. So I think that is definitely one thing that attracted me to this type of show and attracts me to more shows like this.
Amazing. I mean, you've done so much work over the years and I'm guessing you've loved all of it, but what would you say are some of the most memorable projects?
There are a few episodes of the Boss Baby show that I'm really super proud of, but I'm also like kind of a fan of it, you know, because it's sort of like one of those kids shows that's also funny for adults. It has a lot of humor that's directed at and so some episodes, it's actually a lot of the time like the emotional stuff in it tends to be what I'm most proud of. So there are some episodes that are just really heartbreaking and beautiful, and other episodes that like I feel like someone could drop in without having ever seen it. It's not a show, but I also do a jazz gig. That is the project that's very near and dear to me as well. A weekly jazz gig at this speakeasy bar in downtown Los Angeles, where I sort of get to show up and play the music that I've been playing since I was 6, basically.
My favorite moments are when I don't know what's going to happen and I'm kind of a little bit scared and inspiration strikes and the stars align and something amazing happens. When you're making music, it's really kind of like channeling. It's especially true when you are improvising or when you're composing. You really don't know what's going to happen next. I've had times in front of the speakers, like 4 in the morning, I'm just made myself cry because I did something that I just love. You know, those are the moments that just speak to me. And I've been really lucky because I've gotten to play with some of the greats over the years, and I've gotten to score some amazing, projects. Pirates of the Caribbean was really fun when Hans asked me to be the voice and violin of the Scary Mermaids. So I'm scaring children in perpetuity at Disneyland. It's love.
I love hearing how passionate you guys are about music because you can genuinely tell how passionate you are. And like when I mention moments, for you, it's the creation. It's going in head first, seeing what happens and pray for the best. And it's that moment when you actually realize that you did that. And I think that is so inspiring. So I'm going to step a little bit outside of Ginny and Georgia now and kind of ask you guys, what has your overall experience been like within this industry?
I grew up in Los Angeles and I started acting when I was 7. My mom used to say, the only thing that's fair is between you and the creation. So really just give your whole heart to the creation and just know that there's going to be ups and downs and people are going to disappoint you and there's going to be a lot of insincere opportunists and there's also going to be people who are totally passionate with whom you really resonate and can really trust. But really the blessing is in your relationship with the creation. So if you give your full heart to that and you enjoy, success is a journey, not a destination. There are a lot of ups and downs, and I always recommend that if anybody wants to be in show business, what I usually say is, if you can think of anything else in life that would make you happy, do that, because it's so, it can be really rocky and it's hard to make a living sometimes. If music or creating is the only thing that would make you happy, then do it. Don't make any excuses for why it didn't work out. You just got to give it your all. You find a way. I had brain damage about 10 years ago. I had pesticide poisoning, and I recovered completely, thank goodness, by playing music. And what I realized when I did research is that music is the best neurotherapy that exists. It literally lights up the entire brain. So not only is it good for your soul, everything is improved by music. So I think it's really important to be creative no matter what you do, and learn as much as possible and figure out how to do it. And I think, that's the beauty. It really is like the connective tissue for me. I've met people from all around the world, and just because of music I've been able to connect with them, even if I couldn't speak the language, and it's been the biggest blessing in my entire life. So I'm just so grateful, and I want to encourage people to be creative no matter what.
My advice is very cerebral. There's one thing that everybody needs to succeed in this industry, and that is people. There are people who you need to know you, to know who you are, to know what you do, to trust you, to want to help you, and you need them in order to make a living at this. We're in an age right now where anybody can basically find anyone's information and contact them. You don't know if they're going to respond, but it's worth a shot. How do you connect with somebody and tell them about who you are? I mean, Nina, you found me on Instagram, and here we are. That's one example. But not just being able to find them and have them find you, but have them know you and have them root for you. Something that's really helped me, it's not so much a thing that I've chosen, it's just a lucky aspect of myself that I've come to appreciate, which is that I really like people. I really like talking to them. I really like getting to know them. I really like hearing what they have to say. And because I genuinely like that stuff, it makes what I'm saying enjoyable, which it is not for some people. What I'm mostly talking about is networking. And I don't want anybody to despair if you don't feel like you have that. There are ways of improving it. Get out of your shell. Take an improv class, because it's getting to know people, it's getting to react to things in real time, it's getting out of your shell, it's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, it's saying yes to things, saying yes to people. It's an extremely collaborative thing. My story earlier about how I went from being an assistant to getting my first gig, I just emailed out of the blue. A lot of them I did. Cold emailing people saying, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I've done. You might end up meeting somebody who will change the course of your career. It's all these things in concert, what Lili is saying about being creative, about all of that stuff. And then there is this aspect of getting to know people and making sure they know what you are, and having real connections with them. And then everything else just feels sort of like luck.
Just to add to what you just said, some advice that was given to me that I found really helpful was that, when you are meeting people, a great way to get them to give you the time of day is to just say, hey, I am a fan, I do XYZ, but I would really like to help you. How can I help you? Most people need help with something. And if there are no strings attached, and if you're pleasant to be around and you can be trusted, then you make yourself valuable. And once you're valuable, then people want to, A, keep you around, and B, help you.
I love that advice. And I think something that I definitely feel like people can take away is this idea of taking chances. One thing that I've always been told as well, the worst thing you can hear in life is a no. That's it. You only live once. Don't just do it. You never know what could happen. Honestly, I just want to say it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. I think a lot of people are going to take some amazing advice away from this. And again, like I said, TV and movie composition is not really talked about. It's kind of, it's important, but actually talking about it, it's not really as discussed as you would say mainstream music with artists one-on-one, if that makes sense. So I do think it is really cool to be talking about TV and movies, because we forget that music makes these movies and TV. Without it, there isn't those scenes, there isn't the characters, there isn't these moments that we built from it. Music plays a huge part. So I just want to say thank you guys.
Thank you for having us. This was a lot of fun.